Jeff Hardy was a guest on the latest episode of Matt Hardy's podcast with John Alba, and in talking about his final night in WWE, he flat out said, he made it very clear, he was not trying to intentionally get released by walking off into the crowd the way he did at that house show. He talked about there being glimmers of hope during his time in WWE, his most recent stint there. He cited last year's Survivor Series, where it came down to him and Seth Rollins. And I remember how fucking over he was in the building that night. Just watching it on Peacock, you could hear it come across on TV. But I heard from a couple of people who were there live, and he was easily the most over person in the building that night. That's why I was pushing the idea at the time so hard. They've got to do at least one match, if not a program, leading into WrestleMania between Roman Reigns and Jeff Hardy. They have to do that match before WrestleMania. They could have easily gotten one pay-per-view match at least out of it. Out of a Jeff Hardy comeback story where he tries to win, one last major championship, his first Universal title before ultimately losing to Roman Reigns, because he wasn't going to beat Roman Reigns, obviously. And it's a match that he himself said he really wanted. He told Steve Austin, that's the match that I want. He wanted to wrestle Roman Reigns. But he says, things felt really good that night at Survivor Series because they were actually doing something with him. Most of the time, he wasn't doing anything. He didn't feel valued. He talked about being at SummerSlam when they were at Allegiant Stadium in Vegas last year, how excited he was to go to Vegas and, it's SummerSlam in this big stadium. And he had no match. He ended up not even being on the card. He was hoping at least even a small role on the show. And he just ended up hanging out there. And the whole time he's backstage wondering, why am I here? What am I even doing here? Not just here in Vegas, but in WWE. What am I doing here? He says he didn't feel important. But that last night in the company, he just said, I'm ready to go. Ready to go in that I'm ready to leave, the building. It kind of hit him like a lightning bolt. He says, I'm ready to go. And so he went over the railing and he disappeared into the crowd. And he said naturally they thought he was on drugs or something, but he wasn't. And I'll say it again, because everyone was beating up on WWE for it. I don't fault WWE for thinking the worst with Jeff Hardy and doing what they did. Did they jump the gun? Absolutely. I still don't understand why they didn't just send him home and wait for the test results to come back before firing him. I understand they wanted him to go to rehab. He said no, and so they fired him. But why not wait until the results of that test came back in? That still doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. But my mind would have gone right to the same place that theirs did if I were them. Jeff said it all worked out in the end, though, because now in AEW, he feels valued again. In WWE, he felt like they were just going to keep him around to sell action figures. And he also talked about getting the call from WWE while he was waiting for his 90 days to expire about wanting to put him in the Hall of Fame. Remember, they dangled that carrot in front of him? And he said he actually felt offended by it. He was actually kind of pissed off. It angered him. Because he felt like, now is not the time. I'm not done yet. And, he's not sure, he says, what their reaction would have been if he would have asked them, hey, what happens if I go to AEW first when my 90 days are up? Are you still going to want to put me in the Hall of Fame this year? And then Matt chimed in and said it's more likely they were offering him the Hall of Fame as a way to get him to stay, which, of course, that's what it was. I don't know why Jeff would think otherwise. That's exactly what they fucking did. WWE is not calling Jeff Hardy weeks after they fired him about putting him in their Hall of Fame if they know he's going to go sign with Tony Khan for a Hardy Boys reunion. I mean, give me a fucking break. It was a very transparent attempt to get him to stay in the company. And Jeff wisely, in so many words, told them to fuck off. But, Jeff said he doesn't really care so much about the Hall of Fame. That stuff doesn't really matter to him. But if it ever does happen, and it will, he feels it should be as the Hardy Boys, with himself and Matt together. And I agree with that 100%. It would not feel right to induct him by himself before the Hardys together get a group induction as a team into the Hall of Fame. Even though he had a bigger singles career than his brother did, if Jeff Hardy ever goes into the WWE Hall of Fame, first and foremost, it has to be as part of the Hardy Boys. AEW set the mark this past week for the largest gate for any pro wrestling event in North America outside of WWE. For its Double or Nothing show in Las Vegas on May 29th, almost 13,000 tickets sold for a gate of over $1.1 million. That just edges out the Ring of Honor New Japan G1 Supercard at MSG 3 years ago. And that was with fans from all over the world, traveling in for WrestleMania that weekend. This is more impressive to me because there is no WrestleMania. This is an AEW exclusive weekend in Vegas. So just under 600 tickets remain for the show. It's going to be nice to have it back in Vegas for the first time since the original Double or Nothing. They've been forced to do the show, with the full Vegas theme and everything from Daly's Place for the past 2 years. And they had the Stadium Stampede stuff next door at the Jaguar Stadium. So, them being back in Vegas may well spell the end of the Stadium Stampede. Or maybe they'll just do Stadium Stampede if they want to keep it as an annual thing. They might have to do it on a different show because they're not going to be in Jacksonville anymore.